Hi and welcome to Whisky Shared. You're watching my review of SMWS Wicked. I'm Toby and you're watching Whisky Shared. Welcome to my review of SMWS 48.157 Wicked. This is the second of 3 SMWS reviews that I'm doing this month, and this particular whisky comes from the Balmenach distillery. Balmenach is a distillery from Speyside, and it's one that I wasn't familiar of until I joined the SMWS. This particular whisky is 8 years old. It's aged in a first fill ex-bourbon barrel. It's 60.4% ABV, and it's one of 217 bottles. As always with SMWS, this is single cask and cask strength. It's also non-chill filtered and natural colour, and was £47.50. Shall we find out what it tastes like? On to the whisky. So before I start nose and tasting, let's have a quick look at the colour. I'd say that is like a pale straw. Really is quite light. Let's start with the nose. Right, so it's quite sweet to start with. I'd say it's reminding me of icing sugar. There's a little bit of fresh hay in there. I'm getting white chocolate. I'm getting marzipan. And I'm also getting like baking spices. Let's move on to the palate. Yeah, so this is a little hot, but for the ABV it isn't so punchy. I'm getting really nice fresh orchard fruits with this, like green apples. And I'm also getting like a poached pear note as well, which is really nice. And because of the ABV, because of the heat, I think this lingers on the palate quite well and for quite long. So that fruitiness, that fresh fruitiness, and that sort of pear note really does linger on the palate for some time. Let's have another sip. Yes, I'm starting to get some milk chocolate, unlike the nose where I was getting white chocolate. There is a creamy sort of milk chocolate note with this. There's some malted cereal as well. You can definitely taste that sort of like malted barley sort of note that really, I'd say it has a ever so slightly bitter note to it as well, but it is quite nice. And there's also, along with that heat and pepper that you'd expect from quite a hot dram, it does make me salivate, and I actually don't find this too intrusive in terms of heat. Unlike others where the cask strength sort of can dominate the palate and you have to add water, I find I don't have to with this one. But when I do, obviously it does reduce that heat ever so slightly, and it makes those fruit notes that I picked up first, it makes them sing. It really makes them sort of step up a notch. Let's have one final sip. Yeah, so I'd say there's a slightly medicinal note, but it not in terms of like iodine or peat, but because obviously, as far as I'm aware, this is an unpeated dram. There isn't any hint of smoke or anything, but that medicinal note reminds me of like cough syrup, and then it starts to turn into quite yeasty, like Marmite note, which is definitely not unpleasant for me. Some people may not like that, but I think it's really nice. And in terms of finish, I'd say it's quite long. There is some bitter dry wood that does linger. There is some vanilla sweetness, and that Marmite sort of yeasty note does sort of linger on the palate for some time. In terms of value, well, obviously this is a single cask strength 8-year-old Speyside. It's non-chill filtered, natural colour, and I think for the, you know, sub £50 price mark, or, you know, that price tag definitely I think is about right. Obviously you've got to be a member of the SMWS to be able to buy this, and as far as I'm aware this is not available anymore. Just like a lot of SMWS, I think they get snapped up pretty quickly. Obviously they've got lots of casks, but there is a limit to the number of bottles that can be released from any particular cask, and with, you know, quite a varied membership across the world, these bottles aren't going to last long. But obviously it will hopefully give you an idea of the sort of profile that Balmenach can give from an ex-bourbon barrel for this sort of age. And I think being naturally presented is probably, you know, the way to go when discovering distilleries you're not familiar with. This is quite an inoffensive dram. It's quite sprightly, it's quite fruity, and it's definitely one that I'd be interested in trying, you know, maybe a slightly older bottling, maybe sort of 12 to 15 years old. I think that might mellow this out, or maybe if it's put in a, you know, a second fill bourbon cask for a little while. But it's definitely a distillery that isn't easy to get hold of. As far as I'm aware, there aren't any core range bottles, so you have to go through an independent bottler to get something like this. If you tried Balmenach before, or even an SMWS Balmenach, then let me know in the comments. I'm always interested. And if you think there's a particular whiskey, you know, that bears the Balmenach name that maybe somebody else bottles, then also let me know in the comments. I'd always be interested to hear your thoughts. Hopefully you found this interesting, and I'll see you again next week for my final SMWS review this month. Stauncher. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, why not give it a like or a comment, and please consider subscribing for more videos like this.